Welcome to Ties That Bind, Law, Family, and Legacy.
Welcome back to Ties That Bind, Law, Family, and Legacy with Patti Garner. Patti is a Tennessee attorney who focuses on estate planning and probate, helping individuals and families make clear, thoughtful decisions about the future and avoid unnecessary complications down the road. With over 20 years of legal experience, she brings a straightforward, practical approach to these conversations. I'm Shameika Rhymes, and today we're talking about what happens if someone dies without a will in Tennessee and how the state decides what happens next. Welcome back, Patti.
Thanks, Shameika. Always good to see you.
Good to see you. So, Patti, what does it mean under Tennessee law when someone dies without a will?
I have seen cases where people thought they had a will and then they divorced and they didn't update the will, and the judge has just totally set the entire will aside, not just the beneficiaries, but everything, where the property was going, how it was going to be done. Um, and so having a will
Yeah.
that's not been updated is just as bad as not having a will. And essentially what it means is that either heir, any heir, could come in and petition the court and ask to be
Hmm.
appointed to be the administrator, can come in and ask to sell the property. And let's say in the particular scenario that I have in mind, let's say one of the sisters is living in dad's home because she had been there taking care of dad. And then you have a sister from out of state who comes in and says, "Well, it's time to sell the house. I know you've lived there for 5 years, and I know you've taken care of him, and I know your kids are in school.
Hmm.
None of that matters to me. It's time to sell the house." So the judge says, "Well, I mean, it's her house too, because she's inheriting 50-50 just like you are under the law. So, yep, let's sell the house."
So, if someone does include that in the will, like don't sell the house, would a judge, well, I guess if there's no will or if the will wasn't updated, the judge, he or she can decide still what happens.
That's exactly right. So then it becomes the judge's complete discretion as to what can happen. And it's unfair from the standpoint of the sister who lived out of state to make her wait. Well, it's just as unfair to make the sister who's lived in the house for 5 years to make her move so quickly. And if you think about it, she probably, if you think the steps through, she probably sold her place or didn't have a place. She may or may not have enough money to get that, to make that move that quickly. It's a lot. And so it's really problematic, probably more problematic than people realize, to be in that position.
Yeah, because if the sister's petty and is like, "And you're not taking dad's furniture, we're gonna sell it with the house," and that's a whole nother issue.
And, oh, she was petty.
Who ends up making decisions about the estate if there's no will naming an executor?
So if there's a will with no executor, or let's say the executor has passed away, then the court would appoint somebody. Somebody from the family could come forward and volunteer. And if that's the case, if there was no objection, then the judge would likely allow that person to be the one. There's so many different scenarios as to what could happen in those situations. That's why it's so important to update those plans.
How does Tennessee decide who inherits property or assets when there's no estate plan in place?
It is very fact dependent. And so if you're married, it would pass to your spouse. If you are not married, it would pass down to your children. If you don't have
Mhm.
children, it would pass out to your brothers and sisters. And if you don't have brothers and sisters, it could go back up to your parents.
So, what kinds of family situations tend to become more complicated when someone dies without a will?
All of them. Because you just don't know what that's gonna bring. You don't know what the judge is gonna do or who's gonna come out of the woodwork, saying, "Hey, that's my dad. I know y'all didn't know he was my dad, but that's my dad, and, I want my share." So it becomes very complicated,
Mhm.
from the standpoint of the family. It's not complicated from the standpoint of the attorney who litigates in probate court regularly. But it
Mhm.
becomes emotional and complicated for the family that's having to endure it. It also
Right.
becomes very expensive. So when you think about not having a will, at a minimum, a will, not having a full estate plan, you figure the cost of an estate plan is probably the bare minimum cost
Mhm.
of filing a petition to probate an estate. which would have to be done whether there's a will or there's not a will. If you own a house, if you have a car, if you have anything that needs to be transferred. So from that perspective, why not? Why not go ahead and take care of the things so that you can make sure that your family doesn't have to endure that?
Well, how can minor children be affected if a parent passes away again without estate planning documents in place?
You have a 10-year-old child, both mom and dad die in a horrific car wreck. The aunt who you despise
Hmm.
decides she wants to raise your kid. And she comes in from 3 states away, uproots your kid, and takes her back to her state with court approval because nobody knew that you despised her and you didn't believe in her morals and you didn't believe she would be the perfect candidate to raise your child because you didn't put it in writing. To me, that's a mother's worst nightmare.
Yeah, yeah. I watched something the other night and it was exactly that scenario and that person was awful to the child. So it's like again, that's a reason I don't know why Cinderella is popping up in my head. That has nothing to do with this, but the evil stepmother.
Sort of like Cinderella, because if you think about it, if dad had done a better job than in the Cinderella story, then Cinderella wouldn't have been Cinderella.
So what does the probate process usually involve when there's no will guiding things?
So it's a petition to probate, to appoint an minister, and
Hmm.
to get, the process moving. And it's gotta be open for 4 months, and that gives you the time to sell the house, to dispose of the stuff, and, make a decision as to who's getting what, or ask the court for permission to distribute to whoever. And depending on what the family
Hmm.
can agree on or not, it can be an easy process, it can be a very difficult process. I encourage everybody to have a conversation with an estate planning attorney. Go in with a full understanding of what you have. Do you have a house? Do you have a car? Do you have bank accounts? Do you have retirements? Do you have multiple
Hmm.
business entities? Then we need to talk about how do we layer those so that we can protect you and so that you can grow and protect your legacy so that, the family is not burdened in the event of your passing. That it's a very worthwhile conversation. It take you an hour. Go have the conversation. I can't say it enough.
Hmm. Well, can you walk us through a situation that you've seen where dying without a will created major problems or conflict for a family?
Yeah, the situation that I talked about earlier with the man, his daughter was living in his house, taking care of him, and then the daughter comes out of state who hadn't had anything to
Hmm.
do with dad, but yet she was making all these demands, and that process, so it's a 4-month process in the state of Tennessee. He hadn't updated his will. He still had his ex-wife listed as the beneficiary of the will, so the judge just completely set that will aside. Um, Daughter was making demands and she was pro se, so she kept setting court hearings, and then she wouldn't show up. And the court gives such deference to people who are
Hmm.
unrepresented or who are self-represented, that, they gave her multiple opportunities for what should have been a 4 to 6 month process, wound up being about an 18 to 20-month process. And then whatever she had asked for, she ended up not coming to the state to get. My client ended up having to haul the stuff off because they had to clear the property out because it sold. So it can just really be an absolute nightmare.
Well, Patty, what difference does having even a basic estate plan make compared to leaving nothing in place at all?
It can make a world of difference for your family and your loved ones. So if there is a will, at least we have a roadmap as to what you wanted and what you intended. Whether or not it gets interpreted correctly by the court, that's a different question. But at least your family knows, well, this is what mama wanted or this is what daddy wanted, and he put it down on paper. And a lot of times they'll honor that. The siblings will go, well, that's what they wanted. So, okay, we'll leave it alone. But having a more thorough plan with a trust in place is really the way that you protect your family. It also prevents, if there's a mortgage on a house and the house payment's got to be made, we have to get permission from the court if there's not a trust and that house is not in a trust. then you got to get permission from the court before you can make the first
Mhm.
house payment, before you can do the things that keep your family up and running. So it really becomes problematic if you haven't taken the steps to put a plan in place, a bare minimum of a will, wonderful, a trust, even better, um, a fantastic layered trust, would just be wonderful if your needs require that. And again, that would be fact dependent, dependent on what your assets are and whether or not we have a house, whether we have rental properties, multiple companies. I mean, it just all depends on the way you would layer that. But having a bare minimum is just a necessary thing. So if you don't have one, please go get one. If you haven't had a conversation with an estate attorney, please go do that. If you're in Middle Tennessee or somewhere in the state of Tennessee, please come see me because everybody needs to have a plan.
Well, Patty, as always, this has been such an informative chat. Thank you for sharing with us what happens if you die without a will in Tennessee.
Thank you. I appreciate you always.
Well, that is it for today's episode of Ties That Bind Law, Family, and Legacy with Patti Garner. If you have questions about your own estate plan or you want to make sure you're making the right decisions for your family, you can reach out to Patti Garner at Garner Law Firm by visiting pattibgarner.com. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the episode with someone who might find it helpful.
Y'all give me a call and let's plan your legacy.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.